Hi friends, welcome to episode 71. It's Easter Saturday and typically the weather's horrible out there, but anyway, we're in here. I was up here 2 days last week. I was up here yesterday, which is Good Friday, and also Tuesday, doing some work on that, and that's all contained within episode 70. So now I've got the fuel pump back, we might look at putting it back this weekend. Any luck? Possibly. Anyway, I'll be progressing with the side of the bus. I need to do some more measurements on wood that we need to order up for it. But tidied it up a bit yesterday, some of that wood. Took some of the old mastic off, took some of the old screws out, and actually it doesn't look too bad. It's just a few key areas on there that I need to look at. So let's see how I get on this 3-day Easter weekend. Right, so I'm going to try and condense 3 days into about 25 minutes, fingers and toes crossed. Let's see how we get on. Yep, a really good Easter, although as I mentioned, the weather was rubbish, but it didn't affect me in the barn. Yep, pumps arrived, so we need to get that fitted and see if that poses any problems. Secondly, working on that frame, we need to get that frame prepped and ready. The window, the upper deck window that the wood had rotted out, that needs some attention, so we're going to have a little pop at that. A few friends popped in over Easter. In fact, it was really quite busy. So, yep, and a good friend of mine who I haven't seen for absolutely ages, Dave Jones, former East London bus and coach, popped in to say hello on Easter Monday. Right, so let's get started. Right, admittedly we don't see a lot of the upper deck of the RT. I'd done this probably about 30 odd years ago. I'd replaced all the Rexine and the lino at the bottom there, as you can see, but I didn't get around to putting those cork tiles back on the floor. But I did do all the Rexine panels, and thanks to London Underground, I actually did most of it at work in my spare time, inverted commas. So anyway, unfortunately I've got to take all this off because what we need to do is to release this window from the frame, and the Rexine panels to a certain degree will actually hold them in, so I need to take all the ones off at the bottom here. My plan of action is to pull the window out but not actually take it right out. Now just roughly where I've got my screwdriver at the moment, there's a bit of wood behind there and it sits below the bottom of the frame, and the only way of getting it out is to pull the main frame of the window outwards. This is the only bit that had actually rotted, surprisingly. Where I am now, there's that panel there. That's a metal panel, which I believe is a stress panel, and it's perhaps the reason why that's the only panel that rotted out. Maybe the damp or whatever that gets into the bus sort of, I don't know, dissipates if it's wooden panel, or maybe it hangs around if it's a metal panel. So anyway, that's how easy it is to take the Rexine panels off. Please don't do that on a bus in service, a preserved bus, because the owner won't be very happy with you. But there we are. I did notice that long one that was sitting just below the window, that's got some little bubbles in it, and I'm going to have to address that at some point. So anyway, that's removing the Rexine panels, ready to start taking the window out from the other side, but we're going to have to flip to the other side of the bus now. Right, so while I had the ladder out, I thought I'd have a look at this frame as well. There was a few small screws still left in there, so I thought I might as well, while I'm up here, prise these out before I went and did that panel that we're after, which is just to the right of me. But yeah, while you're in the area, up on the ladder, you might as well do these little jobs and get that out of the way. Right, so to get this window out, I've got to remove all the little screws that hold it in, and they use loads of them for some reason. I know I joked before when I did the frame on the bus elsewhere that I think whoever designed the RT must have had shares in a screw making factory. So anyway, I mean, I suppose what with the thing rotting out over the years, actually having lots of screws probably actually helped, so maybe they had a bit of foresight there. So anyway, clambered up a ladder and gonna have to remove all these screws and the little flashing bit that goes at the bottom there, because where I'm working, I'm trying to get the window to prise it out without breaking it. So this is the multi-tool that I've got. It's got a fairly sharp blade on one end, and what you do is you push it underneath the metalwork and it breaks all of the original mastic. Remember I mentioned in the previous episode that the mastic's gone rock hard, it's like concrete. So this thing's really good because it gets underneath the metal and it breaks it away. So anyway, there we are. So ready to start the process of now seeing if I can tip this window back out. Now the reason I haven't undone the top screws is because one, I do want it to stay in place, there you go, and secondly I don't want to take the beading off that I put on the top of the bus. I put beading up there, and yeah, I didn't really want to disturb it, but I found a little piece of wood that I could use to prop the window open for a short while, and that then gave me access to the wood that I need to get out. Right, so finally this is it. It shows how bad it is, and it's the only one that's gone like this. There's no other piece of wood that has rotted out so badly as this one. The little blocks you see on the top, they're to hold the Rexine panel in. There they are, look. And the two little sockets, two little brackets you saw just a moment ago, that's holds the seats in place. Right, so there you go. So I had to get the pry bar out. The big bits came out, and I've got them on the bench downstairs. I'll show you them in a second. But the pry bar was needed to pry these out. That's what remained. They were the complete bits that came out. There's a little bit of routing necessary there too. So I'm going to add that to the list of wood that I need to get. It is, as I said, it's quite astonishing that this wood has rotted so badly when nothing else on the bus has rotted. Anyway, there we are. So let's move on. Right, so something else I had on my agenda was to get the remainder of the frame that I could prepped ready for a coat of paint. I'm going to put silver hammerite on this. So one of the things I need to do is get rid of any of the loose rust that was on that. The panel, the original panel work, that sort of metal work, was black. Should I do it black? No, I'll do it silver. So anyway, which is what I did on the other side when I did that about 30 odd years ago. So what I'm doing now is I'm just prepping up. Some of the wood needed a little bit of attention. So yeah, so just get as much of the rust off as I possibly can, and then apply hammerite. Hammerite paint is designed for rusty things, basically. I don't know quite how it works, but apparently it's a protective coat. So I wanted to get this done. I need to put a second coat on at some point in the future, although I'm not going to do that for a couple of weeks or so. I'll let it really harden off. But anyway, there we are. So a little bit of fun. The next thing I needed to do was to get all of the dust out of the frame, and there was a colossal amount of dust here. So trusty airline to the rescue. I do, as I say, before I paint, I like to get as much of the crud off as I possibly can. I'm not going to worry to the same extent as I've done with the cab or anything that's exposed to sort of where people see it. That doesn't mean to say it's any less of a job. It's just it's not the sort of thing you're going to see at a rally, I suppose. Here is the pile of dust, or at least some of it, that came out of the bus. So it is worthwhile blowing the airline over it from time to time. Right, so here's the frame of the bus before we get the paintbrush out, and on cue the paintbrush comes out. So right, I'm going to paint into all the exposed metal work, all that stuff you see in front of shot. I'm going to paint that all with that hammerite silver. As I said before, it's a really good paint, and I did the other side in hammerite for, I don't know, 30 odd years ago, and it looks quite nice. It's quite a good paint as well, because it covers up a multitude of sins, the sort of stuff you use on gates and metal fences and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, but I'm going to do both sides of it. If I was taking the wood out, which I'm not, I would paint inside as well, because when I did the other side, all that wood that you see there literally in shot just fell on the floor. So I had access to all of the metal work, both sides of the metal. Those little sort of, I don't know, waste rail stress panels, there's two of them at the moment. They're both off the bus. I've got two new ones, and I've got to sort of refabricate the seat brackets, but that's a job for another day. At this moment, actually, a friend turned up, was Dave Jones. He just popped his head round the door and said hello. So he's very nice of him to pop in. So anyway, there is the frame of the bus, as it has almost been painted. Right, so I had a nice little natter with Dave, and just as it's starting to, the sun was starting to go down a little bit, I'm back inside the bus now, refinishing off the interior parts of the frame. So there we are. So more on Dave Jones later on. I got some of the bits, a little interesting bit from the conversation that we had that might be of interest and is basically about 3461. Right, this Easter was also a great time to get a couple of buses out in the sunshine. The first one is DM999 and Mark's RM158. But where was everybody hiding? All right, found them. Peter Veers is on the left and Mark is centre of shot. Now, look at all that food on the table. I have a little joke. I always say, when you come up the barn, bring cakes or biscuits or whatever with you. And clearly, Mark and Nick, who's not in shot, and Peter took this to, took it to excess really. And great to see Peter, because Peter's been busy with other things recently, but very kindly he brought 2 big bags of stuff up, including these Easter eggs. And I haven't had an Easter egg in years. I haven't bothered with them, frankly. But it was really lovely. So my one's the one on the far right there, that dairy milk one. So I ended up taking that home. So well done. Thank you very much, Peter. We do have a bit of a joke, by the way. It's a running joke. It's that on a Saturday, I go up at lunchtime. I go to the local fish and chip shop. And I buy fish and chips for anybody that happens to be malingering around during the course of the day. And normally, no matter when I do it, when I come back, there's an extra person. And I feel really guilty having bought fish and chips for everybody, and then sort of this poor person gets left out. So, it's just one of those things, really. But all part of the fun of bus restoration. Right, so having consumed all of that food and several cups of coffee and all the rest of it that we do, it's time to get the pressure washer out. And what I want to do is get as much of the muck off from underneath there as I can while those side panels are still exposed. There's going to be a little bit more that needs to come off the bus, but this is an ideal opportunity to do it. Otherwise you're working in constant mud and muck. She wasn't too bad underneath. I remember back in about 1985, I think it was, when I was working on the underground, that I took it to a place and we actually got it steam cleaned off. And David Jones, who we were having a chat about, visited this bus when it was at Northfleet, and it just after it had been repainted, and he's took a picture of it underneath. It's a little bit blurry, and he's put it on his Flickr account, and it shows the underneath of this RT having been cleaned off and silvered, and it actually looks really quite nice, apart from the little blurry bit, but there we go. It's difficult to, in the old days, get a picture that looks good when it's in semi-darkness. So yeah, so the plan of action is to get as much of the muck off as I possibly can. It will dry out, it will dry out, honestly, even though I managed to flood the workshop floor. And then what I'll do is I'll do some more work on it, and then before I'm ready to respray it, I'll respray the underneath using chassis silver, and I'll give it another wash off again, because it tends to pick up more dirt and dust as you're doing the work. So basically that's that. That's quite a little enjoyable job, and you can have a little think about things while you're doing it, and you actually get a chance to see bits that you haven't spotted before. The other thing I will, maybe one day I might have a chat about fuel tanks, because as you can see the fuel tank here is quite nicely exposed. RTs, RFs had fuel tanks on the near side, whereas RMs and DMSs and everything else that went on after that had the fuel tank on the offside. So it must have given them a bit of a problem with fuel aisles at bus garages. But anyway, there we are, flooding the workshop floor. Right, it's now time to fit the fuel pump. Fingers and toes crossed, it'll go okay. Right, I haven't done one of these in absolute ages. The fuel pump is a really heavy bugger. Luckily I've speeded this all up so you don't have to sit, but it took me probably about half a day to get this back in, but hopefully I can condense it down into about 5 minutes. The fuel pump, as you well know, was overhauled for me by a chap called Dave at his business in Croxley. He's done a really good job of this, and he also gave me a lot of really useful advice about what I should do when I put the pump back, or in this case take it back out again because you realise that something's not quite working. There was a couple of little bits of doweling, like a little stud that was in there, and it's designed to stop the pump moving around. And there was one on it when I took it out, and I mentioned to Dave, I said, I'm sure there must be another one there somewhere. And he said, yeah, you've got to sort that out, because if you don't, the pump could move around, and then that will cause problems potentially with the pump itself. So, and luck would have it, having washed that several times, I found the other bit of downing, it had just sort of slipped out of the bottom of the pump. But then what it does is it sits in a couple of grooves in there, and it stops it moving around. Now what I'm doing in this shot is there's two clamps, one at the front of the pump, one at the back of the pump. The one at the front requires the bolts to be tightened down both at the front and the back. But the one towards the rear has got like a little hook on one side, and it hooks over a bit of the pump. And then all you need to do is tighten up this side of it. But it had some shims in it as well, a number of shims in the back one. And unfortunately they kept falling out. So what I did in the end, I cheated, and I'm sure my friend Frank Strater will go, oh no, you shouldn't do that. I cheated, I got a bit of tape, and I taped them to the bracket, and then I slid them in underneath, because I got so fed up with the damn things keep falling out all the time. Right, this I knew could have been a potential problem before I took it out. Hence the reason why in one of the previous editions you saw where I marked it up, and you can just see that on the cardan shaft, that little piece of black, that black marker pen, and that lines it up with the flywheel. And you can also see, if you look just very on the right hand side, there's a bit of yellow paint there, which is what I put on it so I could get the whole thing lined up. So that's what we needed to do, was to get her lined up back in the original position, and then we know we've got the timing right. If we haven't, we can adjust it on those two little bolts there. But yeah, hopefully that's worked. This is a bit of a beautification, I suppose, of the bus. This is the oil dipstick tube. The oil filler is the one that's just very close to the front of the camera. But this thing is for the dipstick, and RT's didn't have their own sort of dipsticks. They had a garage dipstick which they put in there, and I don't know if RT ones and RM ones were the same or even different. I would have thought they were different, but typically I haven't got a dipstick for it, so I've taken one out of another engine that we've got from Cummins engine, and I've going to adapt it so that it fits into here somehow. But I was quite pleased with this, because I sprayed it all up nicely and cleaned up that little top part, which is a lovely, beautiful, solid brass. We don't do it like that these days, but they did do it back then. So yeah, so I polished that all up and put the tube back in, and I don't want to scratch that tube on the little holder in there. There's a small holder to hold it in. So yeah, get it in and then screw that back down. So that's that done. Right, having got the oil filler dipstick back in, now is the time to put the 6 fuel delivery pipes back. One of them that I took off was damaged. The thread, where it's been put on before, it's been over tightened, which is called the thread to stretch. And when I was trying to put it back in, remember that time we had trying to get it started up about a month and a half ago, I couldn't get it back on. I was really struggling with it, and I thought maybe it's the wrong thread. So I took it in to Dave and said to Dave, I think that thread's wrong on there. He had a look at it and he said, no, it's not, Dean, it's stretched. And my plan was to ask him if he could just simply replace the 2 little nuts that are on the end and use the original tube. But then he noticed the tube had been rubbing on something, and he pointed out there's a good possibility that that might foul at some point in the future. There is, if anyone out there has got an RT, a spare little bit from the pipes. Now there should be this little bit of bonding which holds the 3 pipes on the left hand side, the 3 pipes on the right hand side in place. It stops them shaking about, because what happens is they shake about so much and just snap. Now I'll put a picture up at some point in the future of what I'm looking for, but I've got one for the front of the engine, but I need one for the back of the engine. So if anyone knows where there's one laying about, please drop me a line. Something else I took off was this auxiliary fuel tank, which is on the bulkhead here. This thing basically, it holds a small amount of fuel. The main tank is down on the near side of the bus, as you saw before, and there's a little pump which pumps the fuel up through this pipe work that I've got here in my hand. Now what it does is it then fills up this little auxiliary tank, and the auxiliary tank then gravity feeds down to the fuel pump. Now I don't intend to connect this up to the tank at this stage, because although I drained all the fuel out last week, you recall, and got some of it on the floor, my intention is to leave it disconnected for the time being, just fill it up manually with fuel, which you could do because you've got a little fuel filler there. So fill it up with fuel, which will be more than sufficient to get this to run for probably about half an hour, I hope. Fingers and toes crossed, that is. So yeah, so there we are. So I'd sprayed that in the barn. You may know, I think in the previous one, that when I took it out, it was full of crud, absolutely full of rust and pretty nasty stuff. And I took it, in the end, in frustration, I took it to work and I put it on the steam cleaner and steam cleaned it out. So anyway, the other thing that's looking like the head of a Dalek there, that's the holder for the fuel filter, which is a little sort of circular cylindrical thing. It had a cloth filter in it at some point. Unfortunately, the cloth filter was pretty clogged and manky. You can't get them anymore, but what I did was I put it in a bucket, washed it, and then took it home, put it on in the washing machine, on its own, obviously, not with anything else. And I washed it, and I took it back, showed it to Dave, and Dave said to me, that'll do, Dean, that'll work fine. So now what I've got to do is I've got to pleat it back up, because they're pleated, and then pop it back in again. So that'll be fun. But anyway, that's going to be left off. That filter I'll leave off for the time being, because it does manage to pump anything up. I don't want any of the rancid diesel that was in that tank sort of messing with my nice, clean, fresh fuel. Right, I often like to throw a picture in at the end of these little videos. This one is by my friend Dave Jones, who happened to be in Northfleet in 1977 and was allowed into the garage to take 3 pictures, which are on his Flickr account, of RT3461 over the pits in 1977, just having been repainted in light MBC green. So here it is. It was really nice to see Dave, because he popped in on Easter Monday to have a natter and to have a look at progress on 3461. He also mentioned something that I didn't know, and this is a bit of a fun fact really. Some of you may be aware of Matthew Keat, who's worked at various former London Country bus garages north of London, as it were. Anyway, Matthew's had spells also at Metroline and working for Mulaney's, running their commercial services. Anyway, Matthew, who I know well, has written a book called The London Country Busman. And in that book, he announces that he actually learnt to drive and passed his test in RT3461. So that's quite a nice little link. Anyway, there are a few pictures on Dave's Flickr account if you want to go through them. They are varied. They're buses and trains, because Dave's also very heavily into trains as well. So, yep, and thanks very much for Dave popping in on Easter Monday. Right, well, look, that's a wrap on this one then. And we move on, hopefully, next week to trying to get this bus started up. Let's see if it will work this time round. Right, so I'll leave you with this lovely rainbow that greeted me on Easter Monday evening as I went home about 7:30. Having got the header tank in, having got all the stuff that I needed, it's all prepped. All I need to do now is lay in wait and find somebody who's going to turn up next weekend, nice and early in the morning, hopefully, to help me start the RT. Let's see if we can get her started after at least 25 years.